Hello, everybody, and welcome back to The Advisor with Stacey Chillemi. And today I'm very excited because I'd like to introduce our co-host. And our co-host is Karen Hall, and she is the executive producer of the LA Tribune. And she has one of the top global podcasts, and it's called The Hero Within Me. And it's also rated as the top 2% globally. So you're going to have to check that out. And now we're going to go to the main guest of the show, the one, the only, the Rajesan Nelanthini. And she is a coach, and she is the person that you want to go to when you want to get the best version of yourself. When you want to really feel like you're the top of the platter, when you want to feel like you're gold, she is the coach you want to talk to. And she's here today to to give us some advice about mental health in a marginalized community. And also, she's going to give you some pointers too about the holiday. When you're around people that you love and they might have some mental illness and it might strike you hard or you might not know how to deal with it, she's at the end or in between. You'll have to listen to the whole podcast to find out one. She's going to tell you a little about how you could deal with that. And if you like this episode, don't forget to subscribe and follow. So, Rajesh, and I love when you come on the show because you have such great impact and you are just a wonderful person. So, tell us a little about yourself for people who may not have heard the other episodes, and tell us a little about, how mental health in a marginalized community, how big of an effect that plays in our society.
Yeah, for sure. So for myself, I'm a daughter of refugees. And my parents came here to escape a genocide. So they went through 4 years of experiencing a civil war and being potentially targets of a genocide that was focusing on Tamil minority. So for them to come to Canada and then basically not be taught the skills and resources to actually recognize that they had PTSD, survival's guilt, anxiety, all kinds of stuff that they weren't, knowledgeable in. And as a result, they, went live their lives. They didn't treat any of that. They didn't get the resources they needed. And then they ended up having three daughters. And there's a saying that says, hurt people hurt people. And this is not intentional. It's just these people often just come from a place of hurt and fear, and they just don't know what to do, or they haven't been, educated in the signs and the symptoms and, how to react and deal with it all. So for me, growing up, I was raised on the principles of fear and anxiety and, survival's guilt. So for me, it was a huge, huge impact on my childhood and not to the fault of my parents at all, because mental health wasn't really spoken about back in the day. It still isn't spoken about in the full, the breath that it should be. And it's just only recently really been trying to, being normalized. And that's because, a lot of us grew up, a lot of children of immigrants and refugees grew up with the whole what stays in the house stays in the house, or, keep it within the family, or just pray on it. That's a huge one. Just pray on
Yeah.
it, go pray on it.
Mhm.
Or it'll pass, like just it'll pass. And that's what a lot of us grew up with because there's a stigma of, mental health and there's a stigma of mental illness, but there
Mhm.
wasn't enough education at the time as to understanding what does it mean and what, you know, just destigmatizing it. So I think that's just the importance of this topic as a whole that I would love to dive into today, especially with the holiday season coming up.
Yes.
I know a lot of us are feeling very anxious about the next couple of weeks. A lot of us will be hosting, going to functions and parties. So I think it's definitely important to acknowledge the importance of mental health, especially during the holiday season.
Yes. And one thing I have to say too, just growing up with a disability and knowing so many people that have had mental health issues because I've been in a lot of advocate groups, people with mental health, they were always afraid to say anything because they were ostracized.
Mhm.
People wouldn't hire them if they knew they had a mental illness. People wouldn't treat them the same. They wouldn't look at them the same. So people kept it to themselves. Meanwhile, they weren't getting the help and they weren't getting the attention they needed. And so they weren't getting better. And so their behaviors continued, everything that they were going through continued. Some people suffer from depression, some people suffer from anxiety. There's so many different health issues, post-traumatic stress disorder. And nowadays, it's common. They find that you didn't have to be in the military to have post-traumatic stress disorder. People that have gone through traumatic events in life, no matter what it was, have ended up with post-traumatic stress disorder. But the problem is that we are such a society where we are so opinionated that, people are afraid to come out. But it has gotten better. In the last couple of years, they have come out with more. If you notice, they talk about it more on TV, on commercials, in the papers, in the media, about it's okay to have a mental illness. So when it comes to mental health and in this society, first of all, how do you feel about the way society is now? Do you feel that it has improved? Do you feel that we still have a long way to go? How do people cope with it? Having a mental illness, should they not be so afraid to go for help?
So I think it's definitely improved since I was a kid, but I think we still have a long ways to go. I think specifically, people really need to understand the difference between mental health and mental illness.
Mm,
Mental health is your emotional and mental well-being, whereas mental illness affects how you react and behave
mhm.
and, your thoughts. So I think that's a huge thing to understand. Like
Yeah,
someone, for example, if, anxiety impacts how so many people think and act, post-traumatic stress. It's not something to be ashamed of.
right.
And something that a lot of people don't realize is the more educated you are in terms of understanding, like, you didn't do anything wrong to get a mental health illness. A lot of people feel like the stigma of like, if they have something, it's a sign of weakness or they're crazy, but it's not. A
Yeah.
lot of the times, there's factors that are outside of our control. For example, our environment.
Hmm.
If you grew up in an abusive household, if you grew up in poverty, if you grew up with, an absentee parent or an abusive older sibling or what be it, it's your environment. If it's a high stress environment, it could be even your
Yes.
workplace, your neighborhood, all of that stuff. There's also chemical. A lot of times, a lot of us have medical issues or health concerns that we have to take medication for. But a lot of times, a lot of research, there's still a lot of research that's needed
Yeah.
that a lot of people are only realizing now after years of taking a medicine it's impacting the chemicals in their body.
Right.
And it could also be genetic. A lot of times, a lot of people, years and years down the line don't get diagnosed with anything. And it just, without being properly educated on it or aware, it goes down the line genetically. And these poor people just don't know what's going on wrong with them. They think there's something's wrong, like internally wrong with them. They think that they're growing crazy, but they're not. It's just a part of your genetics that you just need to educate yourself on. And then finally, it's situational. Often it could be a death of a loved one. It could be a car accident. It could be even you getting hurt.
Yes.
A lot of people don't realize that, situations can trigger mental illness.
Oh,
And
yeah.
there's nothing wrong with that. It's just as long as you understand that it's nothing wrong with you. You just need to unfortunately just learn and educate yourself, and that's how you can really truly help yourself move on and move forward and truly just be resilient against the mental illness.
What do you think are some of the first steps someone should take when they realize they're not feeling good, that when they're not happy, they're not in a good place with themselves? How does someone, what are the first steps they need to do? Because a lot of people are shameful, they're embarrassed. I remember receiving a letter that this woman had mental health issues and she kept it quiet because her mother told her that it was a curse. And if she
Mm.
says anything, that nobody will want to be around her. So her whole life, she grew up actually believing that. And,
Oh,
and it really, you hear, there was one person I knew that needed to go for, help to talk to somebody. And she was like, she came from a small, town that, and she said that she was Italian and she says, Italians don't go for help. We don't talk, to therapists, So it's like, what's the best things like if you know that you're not happy, you're not in a good place with yourself, you don't feel right, what are some of the things you could do to start your journey on good mental health?
the first thing I would always recommend is just to take a pause and a moment for yourself. Because a lot of time people just, as soon as they think or realize that something's wrong with them, their body and their mind kind of just starts racing. And as a result, you heart races, like anxiety attacks, or you make impulsive decisions that don't really help you or they're not in your best interest. So
Right.
usually the first thing I tell someone to do is the moment that they recognize someone, just to stop and sit with it
Hmm.
because you need to truly understand what's going on with you before you can ask for help. Just pause and take a moment and be like, hey, like my stomach is really not feeling well, or my heart's racing, my heart rate's going up, I feel dizzy, I feel just sit and take a moment and take 3 deep breaths
Yeah.
and just kind of take a moment and pause and really understand what's truly going on with you. If it's, are you able to figure out if it's a situation? Is it a person? Is it a memory? Is it, the idea of the impending future? Like all these kinds of things. And, the moment that you just kind of pause and take a breath, the next step is to get help.
Yeah.
Reach out. I think what I'm so happy about now, if we go back to mental health now versus mental health before, mental health resources are so much more accessible now
Yes.
because of Google and because of all, AI and all this kind of stuff that's out there. And, before you didn't have that. So the moment that you realize like, hey, something's wrong with my mental well-being, I'm experiencing mental and emotional distress, the next thing you should do is you can either call a friend to talk it out or go on Google and just easily search up finding a therapist. There's so many online therapists now. This wasn't a thing when I was younger. Now it's a thing. It's so much easier.
Yeah.
You have the resources. You have, if you're a student, a lot of people don't realize your school resources, they have therapists on site and it's free. You don't have, and it's very discreet. You don't have to tell anyone. You can just go to therapy, sit with the person, and go back to your classes or take a moment for yourself. There's the insurance. A lot of people don't use up their insurances for that. But
Yep.
there's so many accessible tools online that people can do.
Right.
And that's something that are just leaps and bounds. And I think the number one thing I want people to understand is I know a lot of people say, "Oh, I don't want to go to therapy," or like, "I don't need that. Therapy's for a certain type of person."
Weakness.
And it's a weakness or it's something wrong with you or but the way that I kind of shut that down is, for example, if you broke your foot, you're not going to walk around months on a broken foot. You're going to pass out from the pain.
Yeah.
So if you're in physical pain, you go to a doctor. So why can't you go to a doctor if you're in emotional pain? A
Right.
lot of times people don't realize that, for example, I have anxiety. I'm a very anxious person. So for me, if I don't take care or do any self-care practices, my heart races. I feel like I'm moving 10 times the speed as to everyone else. I'm overthinking, I shake. And a lot like that's my body response, like my chest hurts, like my body is going through it. And a lot of people don't realize that your mind and body is connected, that mind-body connection. So essentially, mental health pain, emotional pain, mental distress ties into your body. That's why
Yeah.
a lot of people feel aches and pains. That's why a lot of people, they have tight clock locked jaws, they have, tight shoulders, chest pain. A lot of people gain weight because of all the stress that they're dealing with that they don't know how to, um, disperse in a way or, have an outlet for it. So mental health is connected to your physical health. A lot of people don't realize that.
Oh, yeah.
And that's why I always give the analogy of if you have a broken foot, you're not going to walk around with a broken foot and just pray to God that it'll fix the next day or just sucker through it. Your leg will mend itself. Like no, like you need to go get help. So
Yeah.
why can't mental health be treated that way?
100%. I just like to ask you when you go through anxiety and you get moments where your anxiety starts to act up, what are some of the things that you do to help your anxiety? Because there's so many people that suffer from anxiety. It's
Yeah.
talked about very frequently because it's something that everybody
Mhm.
goes through, but to all different degrees.
Yeah. I speak out loud to myself, because it was kind of like what I mentioned earlier, just taking that pause and acknowledging what's happening. So for me, whenever I feel anxious, I start with like very surface level, like, hey, I'm feeling very anxious. I don't know why. And then I kind of do this thing where I tap my chest or I tap like my wrist, because it kind of just brings you back to the moment. Or sometimes, depending on where I am, if I'm at home, I'll just sit on the ground. Like I'll
Yeah.
either lie flat on the ground or I'll just cross-leg myself and just sit on the floor. And because this is kind of brings you into the moment now, or I go for a walk. Anything that helps to ground me, I do it. And what that does is that kind of brings me back into the moment, because usually when I have anxiety, it's because I have 10 computer tabs open in my brain and I'm trying to figure out what to do. And so, in terms of when I acknowledge and I say it out loud, I'm like, hey, I'm feeling anxious. I don't know why. Okay, let me think about what's going on. And then I'll take a moment and reflect, okay, what's going on? Is it because I have a big meeting coming up? Is it because I made a mistake and I was worried about telling someone about it? Or is it because, there's a family gathering coming up and I really don't want to go and I don't know what to do? And it's just, I go through literally everything that I've been known to be triggered by. And as I go through that list and I think, okay, I think it's this and I think it's this. And then I'm able to hone in on, okay, these are the things that are making me feel anxious right now. What can I do?
Right.
Can I maybe delay that meeting? Can I better prepare for that meeting? Can I maybe, tell my family I'm not feeling well so I don't have to go to that function?
Right.
And once I do that, it's much easier for me to kind of bring myself back into the moment and be like, hey, listen, like I can figure this out. I know what's, triggering me or what's setting me off, but I also know what I can do to get help. And sometimes it could be, booking a therapy session or
Right.
calling a friend, talking to, my partner and asking, just getting it out in getting my thoughts out, even journaling.
Right.
Because a lot of times, it could be in the middle of the night when you have this anxiety attack or an episode. And, sometimes you don't have someone you can call.
Yeah.
So what I like to do then is I have a journal by my bed and I just take it out and I start writing, like I'm feeling anxious. Why? And then I'll say my reasoning and then I'll say why again. Like, you know how they say like ask why 5 times?
Yeah.
Like I keep doing that. I don't rush this exercise at all because sometimes like it's very surface level, but then you have to really think and marinate. Okay, like why am I anxious? Is it because I'm scared I don't like, is it because I'm nervous about going to work? Why am I nervous about work? I went to work yesterday and I was fine. Oh, is it because I'm seeing this particular coworker that I don't like? Okay, why don't I like that coworker? Okay, what does that coworker do? And it's kind of like going through all these steps and it kind of really helps bring you back to the moment. And once you can hone in on specifically what's causing you distress in that moment, it's so much easier to figure out what the next step is, and which could be maybe you need to take a day. Maybe you need to come up with a plan to help protect yourself. Maybe
Right.
you need to be, for example, take more care on the day that you know a specific event is happening. Maybe isolate from other people so you're not as stimulated. Like there's always things that you can do, but whatever I'm saying may not work for you guys. It's everyone's has their own way of coping.
Right.
But the thing is, you have to be able to be willing to put in the work to learn about yourself to understand what helps you. And I think a lot of people don't think that. A lot of people just think they go to therapy, that's it. No, there's more homework that needs to be done because your therapist isn't always available. Your coach isn't always available. Your friend isn't always available. So you need to be able to be comfortable with being really uncomfortable
Yeah.
because in learning and exposing yourself to that, you learn more about what truly helps you as a person because what helps you may not help me. And I think a lot of people don't realize that.
Right. A lot of times I would like to journal and I would put music on and the certain
Mhm.
songs would resonate and it would bring me to a level of calmness and then all of a sudden I would get these words and these and all of a sudden it was like someone was talking to me and I just like all these things were just like flashing through my head and then I would start to write them down and
Mhm.
it actually at the end I actually felt better because I
Yeah.
think it was a lot of those repressed emotions that were causing me whatever I was going through at the time. And just by putting it on paper, or even I was in front of my PC once and I started listening to music, and all of a sudden, I was having a tough day, and then all these thoughts came through my head, and I started writing them down real quickly. And by the end of it, I felt better.
Yeah. It's because you're taking all of the mess and the chaos in your mind, all these tabs, and you're just putting it on paper. And once you take it out of here and you put it on a piece of paper, you just see the thoughts in front of you more, and it's easier to dissect and really tackle. Whereas when everything's in your mind has so many voices. Like as soon as a thought comes up, another one comes up, and your mind just has this amazing ability to have do so many things at once, but it's also a blessing and a curse. So
Yeah.
by getting it in paper, it helps kind of organize and kind of just bring focus
Mhm.
into what's really going on. So yeah, no, I honestly love journaling and I cannot recommend it enough.
What do you
I
think, Karen?
was going to say I totally relate to this whole conversation. I was having this conversation with Stacy actually about how many times my anxiety flares up in the middle of the night. And who is there to talk to at 3 a.m.?
Yes.
And so when you said that, I was thinking back about how the journaling helps me. And I go through that same thing of why. And then I also ask myself, what are you afraid of?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that one really helps me because I get down because at first I might be afraid of a certain thing, like maybe, they might say that person might say something at work, that I don't like. Well, then as it gets deeper and deeper, I get down to the core wound, really.
Right.
And then what I find that is so helpful, that what you said is that then I become the observer, because then it's on the paper, and it's
Mhm.
like a different part of my brain is at work when it's reading it versus
Yeah.
when it's
Yeah.
just going jumble, 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 loop, 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 loop. And I just think that is such a wonderful tool that you shared, and how effective that is for you, because it's very effective for me. That totally resonated with me.
Oh yeah. For me, it's gone to the point where I get excited when my journals are almost to the end of the page because that just means I get to go shopping for a new journal and I get so excited. It's like become like a thing. Like my husband thinks it's so weird, but I get so excited. Or even like when my pen runs out, I have to get a new pen. It's like it's something that I look forward to. It's something that's very special and sentimental to me at this point. And something that I recommend that I don't know if a lot of people do, but I keep my journals.
Yes.
Mhm.
And the reason why is, and I know, like, I'm not saying be a hoarder and clutter and no, no, no. I'm just saying keep your journals because once in a while I ask that I go back and I look at journal entries I've done from a year ago, 2 months ago, even 3 months ago, I look at, and it's insane how much growth that we don't realize happens. Because a
Yeah.
lot of time people measure growth as in how much weight you've lost, how much money you make, how big your house is, but a lot of people don't realize it's important to measure your mental health growth as well.
Yeah. So
Oh,
true. And,
yes.
and and the other thing, I think what's interesting about what you said is I've been keeping a journal ever since I was like 9 years old. And
Yeah.
so when I go back and I read journal entries in the past, I have the same core wound. And that's another thing that I'm like,
Mhm.
that Karen, this is normal. This is something that, you know, it rears its ugly head again, and that's okay. And but look how far ahead you are. And I celebrate when I read those past journals. I'm like, wow, I learned tools. I have these things that I can say to myself. Like you said, you talk to yourself. I can talk to myself. I didn't know I could say that thing or do that thing. And I didn't know I could look at it that way. And so I think that's so important to celebrate that growth within ourselves, because that's a huge self-esteem booster. And it's also very empowering.
And
Yes.
I think it's also such an amazing tool for someone that is beginning their journey and it's hard for them to really identify triggers, identify what will truly help them feel better. Because
Hmm.
that's what, when I first started my journey, I had no idea what was setting my anxiety off, no idea. And I had no idea I was depressed for a while too. So for me, I had no understanding of what was going on. I just thought I was the issue. But it
Yeah.
was through journaling and actually looking back at my journals, it kind of, I noticed a pattern. And
Yeah.
like you mentioned, it was a core wound. For me, it was a pattern, noticing that, I was living my life for others, noticing that I was seeking validation of family members and I was afraid of the opinions of family members and getting the approval of my parents, getting the approval of my partners and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
journaling really help you to really understand who you are as a person and really to kind of help. I always call it reintroduce yourself to you because a lot
Yeah.
of people, we grow up and we lose touch with who we are. We lose touch with our true hopes and desires and dreams because we just become suckers to the rat race. Become suckers to society's expectations, and we
Yes.
don't realize that. And through journaling, you kind of slowly, slowly start reconnecting and pulling yourself back to your true soul. And a
Yeah.
lot of people forget that and don't realize that. And I think that's a true shame because I think Stacey, you and I are talking about this. Like we've kind of gotten away from the true purpose of people just are so distracted with everything going on that people just forget to live. And
Yeah.
people forget that we're just here to experience life and love and just seek happiness and joy. And a lot of people just forget that, and that's just a shame.
And that inner child, I think, too, is always in us, but we lose track of that inner child. We get
Mhm.
so caught up with the responsibilities of being an adult and everything around us that we forget that that inner child still lives within us, and that we should always connect with that inner child because that's what makes us happy. The silly little things that brought joy to us as children. I guarantee if you did them now, they would put a smile on your face. And it's like we have to really stay connected with who we are, what made us the people we are. Because honestly, we are still that child. The same person we are, we're just an adult form of who we are when we were children. And my son who is grown up, he still likes Spider-Man and he still plays video games. So that tells you that inner child didn't leave him and he's still connected with it, you know, but it brings him joy. It brings him happiness. It releases stress. It's like, who is our inner child? Do we know who our inner child is? And if we do, you know, let's take some time to try to connect with that inner child. And you know, the funniest thing that you said that really resonated with me is when you write and then you go back, you know, there was, you know, for the longest time, I didn't know why I was feeling so stressed. And then I was looking at my writing and I was going through a lot of chronic pain. And when I started journaling, I realized that it was all the pain that I experienced in life, both emotionally and physically, that when I started to have physical pain, it was like it was bringing back even the emotional pain that I suffered growing up. And it was like I got to the point where I just wanted to go on life happy. I don't want to feel pain, emotional or physical. I just want to be happy. And that was a big thing that was going on, but it didn't connect till I started journaling. And then I made the connection through the journaling.
Oh yes. And also it's like it kind of I love looking back at journaling because you kind of are surprised at yourself because you're like, I can't believe a year ago like this is how I was talking about myself, or I can't believe like I used to think that about myself. Like what
Yeah.
the like I was terrible. And versus now, like it kind of puts all problems and issues to a perspective, right? Before people, for example, myself, I would always journal like if I only had, $100,000 more money, I'd be so much happier. And then, I got the money, and then all of a sudden I realized like, and then I noticed my journals didn't change. I kept asking for more money, and
Yeah.
in the end, it kind of just showed me like, okay, money isn't like the thing that I need. It's
Yes.
something else. What is that? So like journaling is also a good way to kind of call yourself out.
Yes.
Because sometimes when we journal, it's hard to, and it's very human. Like it's hard to be super vulnerable in journaling every single time.
Right.
Excuse me. And a lot of people don't realize that. A lot of people realize like sometimes you need to look back to call yourself out too.
Yes. And I think one thing too is that, you know what, I would criticize myself. Yeah, I haven't accomplished this, I haven't done this, and da 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 da. But then when I would look back and see where I was a year ago, I'm like, wow, what a difference, you know? And then I felt good about myself. Sometimes we self-doubt ourselves, or sometimes we're our worst critics. But if we do look back at ourselves, and that could be done through journaling, you realize, you know, that we've all made probably substantial growth. If you're looking to be a better person, the better version of you, you'll realize, like, especially through journaling, that, you know, if you look back from a year to where you are now and you're trying to work on yourself, people most of the time come a long way and they don't even realize it.
Yeah. And I think it's important to think about that, especially during the holiday season, because what I'm thinking is like a lot of people are like, oh crap, I gotta see my mom, I gotta see my in-laws, I gotta see my cousins. And a lot of people come with that mindset of, okay, like I'm behind, or I have something to prove, or I have to show them something, I have to show them that I'm not weak, I have to hide everything, I have to, can't be vulnerable with them. And that's what's something that, it's such a bad, bad mindset. And it's something as a society as a whole that we've just been told that is normal. Like that's something that we're expected to do.
Yeah,
So I think it's so important to acknowledge like it's okay. Like when people say I'm behind in life, I always say like according to whose standards?
right.
And I
Very,
always get them to sit down when I had a client the other day that was like, "Oh, I'm so behind in life. Like, I see all you guys doing this and I'm not doing that." And I said, "Well, just because I'm doing it doesn't mean you should be doing it.
right.
You don't even like doing what I'm doing. So why do you want to chase what I have?
Yeah,
It's not the same." And I had to, sit this person down and be like, "Look what you've accomplished. Like, look at your career. Look at what you do. You're financially I have a $5,000 mortgage, but you have abundant amount of cash that you can clearly use strategically. And so a lot of people just we fall in this comparison trap, and they always say comparison's a thief of joy.
yes,
And especially during the holiday seasons, we always have this need to, perform for other people,
yeah,
right? We hide who we truly are, we hide our vulnerability, we perform, and then by the end of the day, we are drained and we feel so miserable and we don't know why. Well, because we're all performing like monkeys at a circus for no
yeah.
reason.
Very
And
true.
a lot of people are scared because they don't want to put that, the only way to help yourself or protect yourself is to set those boundaries, to create a space of vulnerability and safety.
Right. Very.
And for example, like you mentioned, like, when you do go to these holiday parties or these family functions and you know you're gonna come across someone that may trigger you or someone that you may know has a mental illness, but they may not have the help for it or they are in the journey of learning. And they may not have a whole grasp on it. That's why it's so important to be, especially the holiday season, to be so compassionate and
Yeah.
understanding. And always, if someone does have an outburst or if someone, reacts a certain way, even if you have an outburst or you react or you feel yourself getting triggered, it's so important to have a pause and like just give everyone love. I think that's the best advice I can give is if someone is coming at you and yelling at you, please
Yeah.
know like it's always a place of fear and pain.
Yes.
And that's the biggest thing that's helped me in any kind of family event or party or workplace environment or anything is when someone is making me feel uncomfortable, making me feel unsafe, I always kind of pretend that I become like an out of body experience where like I'm here, but my soul has left and it's just watching me. And it's kind of like, huh, like, okay, so this is happening, but this person, I think they're under a lot of stress or there's something going on that I can't see. So you know what? I think it's coming from a place of pain and hurt. Okay, let me not add to the fire. Let me just, give them compassion and love to as much as I can personally handle. And
Right.
then I can easily just excuse myself and tell the person, depending, it's up to you, but when I'm in family environments where I'm feeling very anxious, I feel my anxiety building, or
Yeah.
I don't feel comfortable, I feel my energy is depleting. I always kind of say my comment, but I say a comment of love, being like, hey, I understand you're going through a lot right now. Maybe, let's, what do you want to talk about? Or, hey, I know this person said this to you, but I think they're going through a lot of stress. Try not to, I know it's hurtful right now, but just maybe they're going through something, maybe just take a moment and pause. Or, hey, do you understand why they're saying that? Do you think it's because they feel like you ignored them for the whole year and all of a sudden you're coming here and trying to ask for a Christmas gift? Like just trying to help people guide them through, or hey, do you want to go for a walk? Oh, hey, do you want to go get a hot cocoa? And then if I feel like I'm reaching my capacity, I set the boundary of saying, hey, I'm getting really tired. I think I'm just gonna go home. Or, hey, let me run to the store quick and buy more cookies. Like it's always something you can always do to remove yourself.
Yeah.
And it's your decision whether you want to leave that situation for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, or just go home. And there's
Right.
nothing wrong with that. And I think that's what a lot of people don't realize. They just feel like they have to sucker through until everyone it goes home.
Right.
Right? Especially if you're a host. I feel like that's like a lot of things. Like I'm hosting a lot this year. So
Yeah.
for myself, I have to kind of remind myself, like, hey, if I'm feeling very anxious, like I can go to the washroom and
It,
no one will know the wiser. Everyone will be so busy with themselves talking and chatting. I can go to the washroom and just take a couple of breaths. I can excuse myself and go to the store and buy something. I can, tap in my husband and say, hey, I need a minute here. Can you just, help with the in-laws?
yeah.
And even if you want to grab a friend and say, hey, do you want to go ch for a chat outside? I think I need some fresh air. There's always things that you can do. Plus I feel like there's so many tricks now that people do if they want to like get their host to leave, their guest to leave. They can pretend to yawn and fall asleep on the couch. You can start serving everyone tea,
Yeah.
serve a bunch of chamomile tea, give little indications, or
That's
just
a
simply
good trick. I like that.
yeah, no, that's what I usually do. I usually either fall asleep on the couch, start yawning, or I think also sometimes, and I've been to parties where I actually like praise the host for doing this, but they actually kind of say, hey guys, it's getting really late. I'm so sorry. I have work tomorrow morning, or hey, I have a thing. I have to wake up early tomorrow. Is it okay if we call it a night? Like I've had hosts do that. And
Yeah.
and no one throws a temper tantrum. Everyone's always like, "Oh yes, of course, of course," and then they'll, respectfully go. So I think it's important this holiday season to set boundaries, and there's a way to do it
Yeah.
without, being coming off as rude or aggressive, because I think that's what a lot of
Right.
people are afraid of. As long as you kind of say, "Hey, I'm feeling this way. I'm tired," or "Hey, I need a break," or "Hey, let me just step out for a minute." Nothing wrong with that. Um,
I think I'm going to mix the sleepy tea with the coffee this year.
yeah. No, usually right at the end of the party, the host is always like, anyone want tea? Anyone want tea? Anyone, huh? Or like, I think my favorite is I've been at a party where I had a friend change out of her party clothes into her pajamas and come back out. I think that is probably, I maybe try that this year, but I feel like that
Oh,
is probably
that
the
is
best act
funny.
I've ever seen.
I like that, Karen. What about you?
I think it's a brilliant hostess move.
Yeah.
It's a
I,
message without the message. I mean, you don't even have to say any words.
I
No, but
have
think
some
about
Christmas
it.
onesies downstairs in the basement. I might just
Yeah.
get them out. I'll come upstairs with looking like the Grinch. Oh!
No, but think about it like this too. You show up in your like your onesie, your pajamas, and all of a sudden you see people who are wearing, not the most comfiest clothes, and all of a sudden in their head they're like, "Wait, I want to wear my pajamas. I want to get out. I want to wear a pair of sweatpants." And then naturally they're like, "Oh, all right. I think it's time for me to make sure I'm comfortable and go home." So you're just helping
Exactly.
everyone in the end, honestly.
Yes, it's a win-win.
It's a
Oh,
win-win.
but honestly, jokes aside, I think it's just so important just to acknowledge that it's okay to place boundaries and there's ways to do it
Yes,
without, causing chaos, right? There are ways to look after yourself without causing chaos. And I think that's what a lot of people are afraid of. They're worried that if they do set a boundary or if they do speak up or, God forbid you talk about your feelings, like there's always a way to do it
right,
that people can receive it and understand it without you over explaining or or maybe oversharing something that's something really personal to you that you don't want to. It
right.
all depends on the crowd that you're with and the level of vulnerability that you're able to, you know, have with them.
Denzel Washington really stresses in a lot of his motivational talks that it's not what others think of you or say, it's what you think of yourself. And I think that's what
Exactly.
we really have to keep in mind. It's not what anyone else says. If you are confident in who you are and you know who you are, then anyone else's words is not going to matter. Those people are probably, like you said, hurting, envious, maybe jealous because maybe you're at a different place where they might want to be. And when it comes to having borders and I think some the big even he mentioned in his talks that one of the biggest problems is that people for so long they just want to be good and say yes, 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 and then they get to a point in their lives where they're starting to put some boundaries and the other people around them aren't used to those boundaries. And
Yeah.
that's when the confliction becomes because they're like, wait a second, I'm not used to this. I don't like
Mhm.
this. They're saying no. They're saying, I only want this.
Yeah.
And then that's, I think, what causes the problem. What do you think people can do if they've always been the pleaser? They've always been, trying to always say yes and make peace with everybody. And all of a sudden they get to the point in their life, they're like, you know what? I need boundaries. I'm saying yes, but it's not making me happy. Inside, it's stressing me out, maybe giving me anxiety. How do you slip those boundaries in without having the big shocker or the confliction?
Oh yeah. So I think bringing it back to the marginalized communities, I think a lot of us go through this, right? A lot of us go through this where, we hear things like stay within the family or we grew up with no boundaries. It's your
Yeah,
parents are the ones that do whatever they want, your family does whatever they want. There's no boundaries or no one respects your boundaries because we weren't told or taught to enforce them. So
yes,
I personally grew up, I'm a people pleaser, 100%, seek validation, approval. That's my whole shtick. And for me, it starts small. You have to start saying, it all starts with you. It's not how your family perceives them, it's how well you can stand your ground and how well you are able to cope with someone not liking what you say. So
yeah,
it starts with learning to say no and start small. For example, if someone, when my mom or my dad would say, "Hey, can you go pick up your sister?" while I was studying for an exam, I would say, "Actually, no, I'm sorry. Like, I really need to focus." And of course, they got mad at me. Of course, they said I was being selfish and how they've worked a whole day and they're tired, and as rightfully so, they should be exhausted. But
mm,
at the same time, they're able to say no. How
right,
come I can't say no? So it's kind of like it
right,
starts small. I wouldn't say, go big and go, like maybe start within your home first,
yeah,
whether it be your spouse or your friend, just saying no. I've had instances where, a friend would say, "Why aren't you planning this event?" And I say, "Because I don't want to." "But you
right,
always do it." And then I'll say, "Well, I don't want to anymore. I'm tired."
right,
then who's going to do it? And I'm like, well, I'm sure you guys can figure it out.
Yes.
I'm sure whatever you guys do will be fine. Like I think just and of course there was a lot of backlash and of course things, they didn't plan it well or but if you are always there to, push someone back up, how are they going to push themselves back up if you're not there? So I think
Right.
regardless, and I feel so bad saying this, is if once you start putting boundaries, you will face conflict. You will face resistance.
Hmm.
But it just comes down to you being able to stay true to yourself and understanding your why. The stronger your why is, the easier it gets to stand your ground. If you don't know why you're setting boundaries, then what's the point? You're
Right.
easily going to fall back on your old habits and you're just going to keep burning yourself out and not looking after your mental health. But if you
Yeah.
truly understand your why, like I'm setting boundaries because I am tired of spending my energy and I want to be able to come home to my family and my kids and create memories with them. That's a great why. Or
Yeah.
is your why, I want to be able to go home and focus on my business because I want to achieve financial freedom so I can travel the world and help people. Like that's a strong why,
Right.
right? But if you don't understand your why, then it's so much harder to put your boundaries in because when you start putting boundaries, it's going to take time. It doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
I started placing boundaries when I was, God, 24, like 23, 24, like after decades. A lot of people are, in their 30s, 40s, 50s that are just starting to put boundaries now.
Yeah.
That's basically decades of relearning and reconfiguration and redoing your neuron pathways and teaching people in your community who've literally have access for you for decades. You're
Right.
changing that.
Yeah.
People don't like change. And that's, you will face resistance, but it comes down to your why. The stronger your why is, the easier it is for you to hold your ground and, just kind of tell yourself like this will pass.
Right.
This will get better. Once people understand what your boundaries are, you're kind of teaching themselves as well as yourself what
Yes.
your boundaries are. And eventually over time it gets better.
Yes.
And now I have no problem saying no. I can say no with a smile. Before I used to say no and come up with some imaginary excuse, but now I can say no with a smile and say, "Hey, sorry, I can't help you with that. I do wish you the best of luck," or like, "I do
Right.
wish you the best." But for someone that's starting out with boundaries, start small. It could be, "Hey, do you want to go out for dinner today?" "No, not really." Or, "Hey, do you want to go out for drinks after work?" Like those little things, like things that have low implications or low consequences or risks, let's say that.
Yeah.
Start that because that way your brain is getting used to the word no and getting comfortable, like dipping your toe in the water.
Right.
But if for those of people who feel like they need to owe someone an explanation, I don't feel like you should. But I know I started out with feeling like I needed to justify every no.
Right.
Something that I always like to say or do is I'll say, "Hey, sorry, that doesn't work with me. I have an appointment that day," or "Oh, I already made a commitment to someone else," or
Right.
"Hey, I'm not feeling well," or like that kind of helps you because I know a lot of people don't feel comfortable just saying no.
Right.
So it's okay and that's fine, like rightfully so, right? So that's like another thing I did and
Yeah.
then eventually it got to the point where, I started to say no and kind of explain why and say, "Hey, no, this doesn't really make me feel uncomfortable," or "Hey, no, I'm feeling really drained today." And eventually you start getting more confident in yourself and being more secure and it gets easier to say no.
Right.
And it will get to the point where you no longer feel like you owe anyone any explanation.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. That is such a good point. Now, if you had to take today's conversation, you really wanted to emphasize on some important takeaways, what are some things you'd like to tell the listeners?
I think a lot of people need to understand that when they say mental health or mental illness, they feel like they can do it on their own. But if you could really do it on your own, you would have done it by now.
Right.
So I really, really ask one thing for you guys to do today is take time to sit with yourself today, to check in with how you're feeling, and to understand that if the next step for you is to go find a coach, to go find a therapist, there's no harm in that.
Yeah.
And just who knows, one conversation can
Yes.
change your life for the better. And that's something that a lot of people, I hope, take away from that because you have the opportunity to absolutely transform your life
Yes.
into a life full of joy and abundance. And it's just one potential phone call, email, or Google search away.
Yes. 100%. Oh my gosh, that's such good advice. I love it. I love it. Now tell everybody about the services you provide so they know.
Yeah, of course. So I'm a certified transformation coach and a life coach, and I use cognitive behavioral therapy to as a tool. And I do a lot of keynotes. I do a lot of my heart and my soul, my passion is coaching. So I
Yeah.
do a lot of coaching with people who may have either lost a loved one, lost a job, they feel like they've lost who they are. A lot of people who feel like they're behind in life. I help you. I am your guide to
Mhm.
help you on your, I call it your hero's journey.
Yeah.
I am your mentor. I am your guide. I am your light during your hero's journey. And I'm here to make sure that I help you truly transform and have the tools that you need to truly and absolutely transform your life into the life of your dreams, essentially.
I love it. I love it. Now, where can people contact you?
So the easiest thing about me is my socials. So my socials are all the same. It's at nell.rajason across, or you can just find me on LinkedIn and always send me a message or a note if you need someone to talk to or chat, or just if something I've ever done has resonated with you. I think that is what truly makes me so passionate and happy is just knowing that if I even help one person, or if I have one person even change a thought about themselves or have an epiphany about, holy crap, like I need to take back power in my life and I need to, relight my light again, connect with
Yeah.
my inner child again, go have fun again.
Yeah.
That's that will make me more happy than anything in the world.
I love it. I love it. This has been amazing, Rajesh, I love having you on the show. You are always a pleasure, and you always have such great advice. And the next time I tell my husband no, and he asks me why, I'm going to say, "Well, Rajesh told me so." And But yes, thank you so much for coming on the show. I look forward to seeing you soon. And Karen, do you have anything else to say before we go?
Just love the way you summed that up, and I thought it was so great that you said, you know, get comfortable feeling uncomfortable, and when we say no and we feel uncomfortable, just to accept it's okay. This will pass. That's one of my favorite sayings too. So thank you for those key takeaways. Thank you for your brilliant insights and for sharing your story.
Oh, thank you. It's been such fun talking to you too.
Have a great day
And happy holidays.
and happy holidays. Yes.